selling with authenticity.
It's building that relationship.
About the value.
Because you want to make that impact.
It can make you happy.
Elevate others around
Welcome
us.
to the Selling from the Heart podcast, your home for authentic, effective, and socially integrated sales strategies to help you master the art of selling. Join your co-hosts Larry Levine and Daryl Amy, along with some of the world's best sales thought leaders and practitioners, as we explore ways to help you grow your sales.
Hello and welcome back to the Selling from the Heart podcast. Your co-host Daryl Amy here today with Larry Levine. What's going on, Larry?
Okay, all kinds of things. Great seeing you as always. You know what? It's just one of these days, Daryl. I had 3 cups of coffee this morning, and I still haven't been able to kick my brain into this because this is a little segue into the fantastic podcast we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So I had to run to Starbucks, and I had to get my favorite
there we go.
tall Americano. I figured if I went grande, it would I don't know, it'd speed my brain up a little bit, but special shout out to Starbucks. I know our podcast guest is probably going Tim Hortons, but never mind.
It's all good. For the record, Starbucks is not an official sponsor of the Selling from the Heart podcast, but
it's one of my drinks.
Many of our conversations. Hey, welcome back. And they fuel sales as well. Whether you're a Starbucks person, you're a Dunkin' person, or you're Tim Hortons like me and our guest today, we want to welcome you back to the Selling from the Heart podcast. You've joined a growing community of sales professionals that are dedicated to being genuine, being authentic, adding real value. We call it Selling from the Heart. Larry, we're coming off an incredible weekend that got kicked off on Saturday at noon in the Selling from the Heart Insiders group. We had an up close and personal this past week with Tom Hopkins in the group. Just what an amazing thing to be able to get up close and personal with a legendary thought leader and mentor. I mean, mentor through books and tapes and all of that. It was amazing.
I'm telling you, first of all, this is what you can expect when you come into the Insiders group. You'll never know who's going to come out and hang out with us up close and personal. I mean, it was just an hour of pure gold. Here's what was interesting. This is super funny. So Tom chimes in about 10 minutes early and just goes to town. Just immediately starts going into the Tom Hopkins backstory. People are going, the first 10 minutes was pure gold. The whole hour was gold. The first 10 minutes was awesome.
It's so great.
This is what you get at the Selling from the Heart Insiders group.
Yeah, and as much gold as you get from thought leaders like Tom Hopkins and all just the incredible roster of previous up close and personal guests, as much as you get from folks like that, we also get incredible encouragement and ideas from like-hearted sales professionals that are all headed in the same direction. And so if you're listening to the Selling from the Heart podcast and you've listened to more than one episode, you said, no, I buy into the idea of selling from the heart. I buy into authentic relationships. I buy into meaningful value. If you buy into those things, you're going to absolutely love the Insiders group. And we'd love for you to join us. And when you do, you're actually going to get access to the archive of conversations we've had with all of these incredible thought leaders, including the most recent one with Tom Hopkins. So just go to sellingfromtheheart.net/insiders. That's sellingfromtheheart.net/insiders and get access to the Selling from the Heart Insiders group. Try it free for 30 days. And we'd love to get to know you. And I think you're really going to enjoy getting to know the community. And this is a fantastic time right now. I'm so excited about our guest today, Larry, because not only is he a sales expert, not only is he world-renowned and appeared in Harvard, Entrepreneur, Salesforce, Inc., all the places, he's also a fellow Canadian. So, Larry, why don't you introduce
y'all
our
are gonna
guest
y'all are going to gang up
in.
on me now, huh?
Oh, yeah, totally, Larry. We got you surrounded.
I love what David, by the way, welcome, David Priemer. We're just going to have a blast. I've enjoyed getting to know David. We're going to talk about cerebral things, but we're going to tie in empathy and authenticity and selling from the heart. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. Welcome, David, to Selling from the Heart podcast.
Oh, look, it's great to be with you here. Like I said, in the green room, we're going to be dropping the process and the project.
And maybe after we're done, you can hook me up with some of this Starbucks money that I've apparently been missing. So
well,
I got to figure out how to get on that train.
Well, hey, dude, there's Starbucks in the virtual green room. You had to choose between Starbucks and Tim Hortons. So, but me personally, I'd have Tim Hortons.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually used Tim. Not to necessarily get into kind of selling tactics, but Tim Hortons, as many people know, in Canada, is a Canadian institution. But it's been really interesting to see how their advertising has kind of changed and tweaked over the last little while, as they actually try to kind of up-level their brand because they're getting so much competition from the Starbuckses of the world. They've always been kind of like the kind of the native Canadian, kind of hometown thing, but and less expensive, but they're having a hard time competing. And so it's, we'll get into that later on.
We're talking coffee, we're talking sales.
We're bringing them all together.
You know the question that every guest on the Selling from the Heart podcast answers, and that is, what does it mean to you to sell from the heart?
You know what? The biggest thing that I think about is this idea of authenticity. And I'll give you an example. If you have kids out there, I'm sure there's no kids listening to this per se, but if you have kids and you're listening to this, think about this. So I have kids. I have 2 teenagers and one who's a little younger. And when they come to me and they're about to hit me up for something that they believe that I'm going to say no to, right? Or they're going to get some resistance. They want to download an app, or they need a lift, or like a sugary treat, right? Like, I can tell immediately, right? Just by the way they approach me. And so I could argue that they're not selling from the heart because they're not being authentic. And because they're not being authentic, I can tell. I can tell that it's like a pitch, right? You know where I'm coming from here?
Yeah, big time.
We don't even have to go any farther, because here, and by the way, a great example to segue, but it's the truth. So if we tie this into sales, it's the same thing. We'll call it sincerity, insincerity, David, right? If salespeople out there are going to put on the sincerity suit. Hey, you like that one, Daryl? The sincerity suit. I did. God,
trademark Larry Levine.
You
heard it here first, folks.
You're going to tell the Americano's kicking in on this one.
There we go.
If we put on the sincerity suit and we're having these conversations, but we're insincere with the follow through and all that, it's no different than what David was just saying. So we have to be congruent. Just the tip of the cap to Dave Sanderson as he coaches and mentors Daryl and I on this, because he's always talking about congruency. Yeah. Does the walk match the talk, right, David?
Absolutely. And it's funny, when it comes to my kids, they're not so sophisticated where they're picking their words or these kinds of things. It's just it's the tone, it's the mannerisms, which we can all tell. But I'd say when it comes to modern selling, there's a spectrum of things. So even if I have the tone and the mannerisms down, but then I'm using these really fancy, 50-cent words that human beings don't say to each other in real life. It feels like I plucked it, from the marketing headlines. People can tell that too, right? So it's actually deceptive. It's funny to say, just sell from the heart, just be sincere, be authentic. But it's actually this kind of crazy combination of things, tone, words, demeanor, that in many cases in sales, we've been taught to fake over the years. And in a way, we have to almost unlearn to be our authentic selves.
Yeah, when you just think of the synergies between the productivity enhancements and the blah, 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 right? It's like we get in this corporate robot, right? So I'm really intrigued. So cerebral selling. And you talk about this blend of science and empathy. Those things seem like they're not necessarily connected right off the top. I'm curious what the science is telling you about empathy, and what are you learning? What's been the light bulb moment behind cerebral selling, and what we need to be doing and how we need to be approaching this as reps?
For sure. Well, look, so I started my career over 20 years ago as a research scientist. And I say it's funny because we all just get into sales by accident. No one plans to get into sales. So that happened to me in my journey. And so I started out as a solutions engineer, solutions consultant. So I'll shout out if you have SCs listening out there. I was kind of like a demo jockey, if you want to call me that, for 7 or 8 years of these enterprise startups. And it was great. I loved it. And that's kind of where I got my foothold in selling. And then, as I kind of transitioned, I've been a part of 4 high growth startups, and 3 of them ended up being acquired. And one, which I helped start, was acquired by Salesforce. So I came over with the ship. I was at Salesforce for 5 years. So I love sales, right? But I realized that people who love to buy things also hate talking to salespeople. And so as I kind of went through my sales career, And as I was being asked to do more and more, make the calls, like, say this, like it's the end of the month, there's never been a better time to buy. And you start doing all these things that are not unethical and they're not categorically ineffective, but they just, when so I've been a VP of sales 4 times, when people were trying to sell me stuff, because I'm like ground zero for people who want to sell me stuff, none of the stuff they were doing was working on me, right? Like I wasn't answering my phone. I wasn't responding to the LinkedIn messages because I realized, I'm going to say this quietly, I don't like talking to salespeople. Right?
What?
Oh, I know.
Oh
Can you
my
believe
God.
it? Can you believe it?
Can we edit
repeat
this
that.
out?
No,
Don't tell anyone.
you got to repeat that one, but shout it a little louder. You don't have to whisper that way.
Well, no. So it's funny, right? When I work with clients and I say, like, who here, you could be given a keynote, who here likes talking to salespeople? In a room of salespeople, like very few people. In my scientific, thousands of people asked, maybe 70 or 80% of people will say no. So then I thought, okay, well, this isn't good because this is the thing that I love, and I love selling, and I love the authentic selling from the heart. And so my natural inclination was to kind of go back into my like education roots and scientific roots and say, okay. And my science background was engineering and chemistry, and it wasn't like in the psychological sciences. So I said, okay, I love to learn, so let me figure this out. And as I started kind of picking apart the world of sales, almost like an engineering problem, I realized that yes, like there are actually scientific studies and research out there that tell us, and give us clues as to what people respond to, the messages, the approach, the tone. And that's like from a science perspective, yes, like there's all this data and research that goes into like how people make decisions and so on. But then harmonizing that with the empathy, which has to do with like the tone, the approach, and this kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, like the biggest thing that people get wrong when they try to kind of, when they skew too far towards empathy, is they say things like, hey, look, I don't like talking to salespeople. I don't like to be bothered. So you know what? I'm not going to go out and I'm not going to bother my customers. I'll call them once or twice. If they're not interested, I'm going to back off. And I kind of, can I say bullshit? Can I call, is that okay on your show?
You already said it. So it's all good.
Starbucks will edit that out. But
That's
no, I'm calling.
It's a Canadian phrase for those who are not familiar with it.
So no, I say bullshit. I said, hey, look, if you're selling authentically and selling from the heart, like sometimes, if you're working with let's say it's a loved one and you're trying to get them to make a change in their life for the better. Sometimes it takes a lot of nudging and it takes a lot of encouragement and it takes a lot of caring to push them in that direction. And that's actually interesting when you see the data and it says that the average person, like the average BDR, has to spend 8 to 10 outreaches before they actually connect with a buyer. That's not being annoying. It's not even being like rudely persistent. You're actually helping them because ultimately when they decide to go with you, and I've heard this time and time again, I've had this personal experience, they say, thank you. Like, thank you for staying on me. Like, imagine your loved one, right? Like, so empathy does not give you the excuse to be lazy, right? That's the big misnomer.
So, God, this is great stuff. I still want to drill into the research and the science behind this, so we all can geek out for a little bit. But if the research and the science speaks volumes to this, then I want to flip this around. If we know this, then what prevents this, in your opinion, David?
It's a good quote. Well, it's like there's a lot of things that we know, and I actually talk about it in my book. And I'm gonna botch the statistic, but when you think about like health and wellness, and there's never been more health and wellness information out there in the sphere, and yet the percentage of Americans that are obese continues to increase every year, right? And management practices as well. Jeff Effer and Bob Sutton from Stanford, they talk about this, their book, The Knowing Doing Gap, which is like, why are there so many gaps in our leadership practices when there's so much knowledge about leadership? So part of it is just kind of matching these two things up. Like we know oftentimes what to do, but we've been taught to do different things over the course of our careers. And the way I kind of almost describe it, this is the first chapter of my book I called the Cobra Kai paradox. So I'm 46 years old. So when I was 9 in 1984, the movie The Karate Kid came out. And I think about, and now, it's now back, right? In the mainstream and Netflix and so on. And the way I kind of think about like the Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid, universe is that these aren't bad kids. Like these bully jerk kids that are beaten up, they're not bad kids. They're good kids. They were just taught by someone who they mistakenly put their trust in. And so what happens is, and again, was Sensei John Kreese trying to twist them? That's a whole other story. But in the sales sphere, like we just learned from our Sensei, right?
Mhm.
And their sensei learns from their sensei. And whoever your sensei was, that's kind of who you grow up to be. And because there's no sales school, there's no like medical board of sales that you need to be certified, everyone can do it in every way. And also because there's so many different kinds of buyers out there, I might say, hey, you know what, like you absolutely should not do this practice, but you tell me, hey, look, I've had tremendous success with that because maybe that's what your buyer's like, right? So we just end up taking on the form and the industry and the people and the leaders, whatever, that we learn from. And that takes us off the path of like, what is like the real true answer? Like, what does the science actually tell us? That's one of the big reasons.
Oh, hey, this is so good. So here's a quick question. Who was your sensei?
So no, it's great. So I'm very grateful. I've had a lot of great senseis over the years, and especially at Salesforce. So I used to run small business sales for the Eastern US. And in the commercial segment there, we had some amazing empathetic leaders that I fully credit with kind of, helping me kind of not just get on this path, but also realize like you can do sales and still have a conscience and do it in a very ethical and above board way. So I credit, that, but also I think deep down inside, when you think about like an individual learning how to sell, oftentimes even the best sellers, you go to them and you say, do you sometimes feel like a little gross? Like, like sometimes when you execute a tactic that someone, it's the end of the month, end of the quarter, and you call the customer, you say, there's never been a better time to buy. Now how does that make you feel? And for a lot of us, we are actually emotionally encumbered. And I tell a quick story of a BDR who reached out to me, and it was like the standard pitch, like, oh, we can help you with value this, value that. And I basically, instead of taking a meeting with him, I said, hey, look, Daryl, I'm sure you're a lovely, lovely guy here. Here's some advice because I care about you and I don't want to see you go down this path. And I gave him some advice, and he shot me a note back. He's like, David, like I hope my VP's not listening into my emails now, but he said, I would have loved to get the meeting with you, but this interaction has been the most valuable thing I've done all day, even if I didn't get the meeting, because it's like this admission, right? It's like you're all right, LaRusso, at the end of the Karate Kid. It's like, okay, I know this wasn't really like, wasn't me. It wasn't me selling authentically, even sometimes if I can fake it a little bit. And so that's the thing we have to stamp out, like selling from the heart, selling authentically, selling the way you buy is just, acting as you would like to be sold to, but also understanding the pathways and mechanisms behind which people make purchasing decisions so you can align your sales motion that way.
So when you started this journey of research, what was the most surprising thing that you discovered through all of it?
You know what? Like, so for some people, like the way I kind of describe it is I call it unconscious selling, which is not unconscious, meaning like, unethical or whatever. What I'm referring to is there's a lot of people that are doing really good things out there, but they don't know why what they're doing is so good. And so and we meet these people. I'm not talking even about bona fide sellers. You could be like a hairdresser. You could be a personal trainer. There's a lot of, non-sales sellers out there, customer success, and you're doing all these great things, but you don't know why these things work or why they don't. And if you're doing well, but lacking this knowledge, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And if you're doing on the dark side, if you're doing the bad things and you don't know why you should stop doing them, then not only are you not going to be successful, but you're going to ruin it for everyone else. So to me, that was the biggest thing that, when I kind of got into this is like, oh my gosh, there's all this knowledge. To your question, why aren't more people doing this? Like there's a lot of unconscious sellers out there, more so than I realized.
God, this is really fascinating stuff because as I'm listening to what you're saying, David, I don't know, this just popped into my head. So listeners, just bear with me. The coffee and the Americanos are kicking in on this, but I believe this is a gift. And here's why. One of my favorite comedians is Steve Harvey. And you might know Steve Harvey from Family Feud and his botch up on the Miss America pageant, many, many years ago. But he has a saying, and he's a highly religious guy as well. And he goes, I'm a firm believer that everyone's been given a gift. Now he's been given the gift of being funny. And he goes, you either go, you don't go to school to learn how to be funny. It's you're either funny or you're not funny. But I think some of the things that we're talking about, and again, there's no scientific research or anything behind this. It's just my take on this based on how I look up to Steve Harvey is I believe when it comes to empathy and authenticity, we all have it, but some of us have the better gift at it than others, if you get what I'm saying.
I do. I mean, the good thing about what we're talking about here in selling is that you can learn this stuff. I firmly believe, the best sellers can be made. But I agree with you. There are some people that just skew naturally, which is actually why I think you have a lot of these like unconsciously good
Mhm.
sellers, who don't realize maybe the gift they've been given. If only they could, learn to harness it.
Yeah. So what can I totally see that. I'm just going through like all these mental images of people I've known over the years who've had natural empathy skills and crushed it when applied correctly in sales. And I've also some, like you said earlier, who may have empathy skills, but they don't have the other side of it. And so they don't do well. Um, Coach us, if you would, on developing empathy. What would you say to that sales professional that goes, okay, I buy into this. I see what you're saying, David. How do I develop empathy? I'm not born with it. I'm not naturally an empathetic person, but I do, how do you coach someone to do that? What would you say?
So there's a couple things I would say. Like number one is pattern recognition,
Mm,
and number two is just learning the tactics. So when I say pattern recognition, and it's fun. So my wife, God bless her, maybe she can hear me now. She's upstairs. She's a teacher. She's a sixth grade. It's funny. Here's an American Canadian difference.
yes.
Americans say sixth grade, she's a sixth grade
Grade
teacher, and
six.
Canadians we say grade six teacher.
I'm with you. I'm
Okay.
tracking.
There you go. So the Americans are listening. She's a sixth grade.
Hey,
teacher.
thanks for clarifying that for me, David. I appreciate
You
it.
wouldn't have gotten it otherwise. Right? So when my kids, come to her with a problem, and she's used to listening to kids' problems all day, she's very good at kind of pausing and mirroring back them. Oh, honey, I know you're probably really upset because your sister tore up your picture and you worked so hard on it. And if like my kid came to me, I'd be like, okay, all right, well, let's find your sister and let's deal with this.
Right.
I mean, from a character, I'm being facetious, but like
Yeah.
my wife is really good at picking up on when it's time to inject that empathy and show the person that we understand where they're coming from. And so part of it is just pattern recognition. And oftentimes when I've been on the kind of the bad end of a sales rep executing a tactic to a customer that backfired, and then somehow it got escalated to me, of which there were many of those, oftentimes it was the tactic that they learned was quite sound. But the way they executed it, they didn't recognize they didn't have the situational awareness of what was happening, and they didn't execute it at the right time. And we've all experienced this when we get off a call and we're like, shoot, I should have like handled that objection this way, right? Like, why didn't I recognize that pattern? So part of empathy is like that pattern recognition of knowing when it's time to lean in and execute the tactic. And then the other part is just the tactic itself. Like for example, if we're talking about, one of the things I talk about in my book is, quite simply giving customers permission to say no, right? Like if you feel pressured, you're going to automatically resist. And it's interesting, and this is like a nonpartisan comment I'm about to make, but look at what's happening with mask mandates, right? It's not that, maybe some people believe in masks or maybe they don't, but then there's a group of people that say, I'm not going to wear the mask because you're telling me to wear the mask, right? Like that's almost the reason why I don't want to do it. So the same thing happens in sales, is that when we feel like when we're kind of pressuring the customer to do something, even if it's something as simple as, and if you've probably experienced this, you're in the mall, you walk into some clothing store, and someone comes over and says, "Excuse me, sir, can I help you find something?"
Yeah.
And what do you say?
No.
No, not right now. I'm just looking.
You say, yeah, because what if I say yes, then I'm now giving consent for you to do all your sleazy sales stuff to me. So I say no because it puts me in a position of defense. Whereas if the salesperson had just done something very simple, like, hey, look, sir, can I help you find something? And if you want to look around, and I won't bother you, just say the word. If they gave you that, you would actually be, scientifically speaking, 400% more likely to come back and say, actually, there is something I need help with, right? Because you're not feeling that pressure. So sometimes as it relates to empathy, sometimes it's just the knowledge of some of these tactics. And when scientifically speaking, it makes sense to lean in, and when it makes sense to kind of take the pressure off, can have a huge impact on your ability to convert customers.
Hey, I'm just curious. God, this is good stuff, because I'm just thinking about what you were just saying. Do you have is there Best Buys in Canada? I'm just curious.
There are, yeah.
Okay, so the Best Buy in the city that I live in, they have two people sitting at this is absolute truth. They have two people sitting at a front desk, and to your point, here's how they ask every single time I've been in there. What can I help you find today? Because people, and I go, I asked them one day, why do you say this? Because people are coming in here for something.
They don't
So
just wander in
Yeah,
accidentally.
they're not just wandering into a Best Buy to shop around, right? They're going in there for a reason. So they have two people sitting at a front desk, to your point. What can I help you find today?
Yeah. Let me direct you. And I
Yeah.
love that, because it's like, okay, it's calling out, hey, look, you're right. You walked in for a reason. It's a little different because like a Best Buy, there are Best Buys in malls, but you're less likely to your point to wander. You got to park your car, you got to
Yeah.
walk in, and it's like more deliberate. So yeah, I agree. Even in, I read this really interesting article that talked about in retail, like you go to the Gap to buy a t-shirt and they also have someone stationed at the front. But what they also do is that person at the front isn't just like standing there, like, ready to go. They're folding clothes. They're like moving stuff back and forth. And why do they have to do that there? Like, can't they fold clothes somewhere else, right? They do that so that it gives the impression that they're busy doing something else, right? They're not there for you.
They're not just waiting for someone to walk in.
Exactly. I just happen to be. And then they say stuff like, hey, sir, I just got to go into the back for a few minutes to get some more shirts, but, I'll be back. And if you have any questions, then let me know. It gives the impression that I'm not here just for you.
I'm having flashbacks, David, to I think it was between my sophomore and junior year, my first straight commission sales job at Multitech Warehouse Direct. Nobody leaves without a box under their arm. That's a whole other episode of stuff to unpack right there. We definitely got a not so great start in sales. We got a lesson in what not to do. This is sorry for the Canadian down the road journey for my fellow friend from Ontario, but the this whole topic of empathy, I think, is so critical right now. And as we wrap up, we just came out of earlier in the month of October, the Trust Building Challenge. And the reason Larry and I put that challenge together is we recognized this thread in all the common things as we talk to enterprise sales enablement people, VPs of sales, all and sales professionals. That the common thread was no one trusts salespeople, but it's like in some ways it's harder than ever. It's in empathy. What did your research show, or what has your experience shown in terms of the power of empathy? How do empathy and trust relate together from what you've seen? That's what I'm trying to ask.
It's interesting, I haven't seen a study that, because how do you measure empathy, right?
Right.
How do you measure
Great
trust?
question.
It's a little bit harder to measure empathy, but like I have seen studies and reports that talk about trust in professions, and sales is consistently at the, the bottom, so that's not good. But, I think if we execute on some of the tactics we talked about here, like treat others the way that you want to be treated, but also be mindful of how they make purchasing decisions, make life easy for them. Because I love that Best Buy example where it's like, my job is to make life easy for you. It's funny, I'll just as a quick little vignette on that, my third startup, we used to have a free trial. And so people would sign up for the free trial. And then, of course, like as a BDR, you're thinking, okay, I got to pounce on these people with the free trial and I figure out how I'm going to convert them. And so we kind of changed our talk track from, oh, hey, let me help you and all this kind of stuff to, hey, look, I know you signed up for the free trial, which probably means you're going to be like clicking around. Would you be interested in saving some clicking around time? And I could just kind of explain it to you. And for a lot of people, that was a huge draw. Now yes, I would love to save some clicking around time, because that really in the back of my head, that's what I thought this would be. And so we do things sometimes as buyers, like we sign up for free trials, or we ask for references. Like I have a whole talk track on references. My view on references is that it's a bit of a statement of fear. When someone asks to speak to a reference, it means that like, hey, look, I don't think this is going in the direction where I want. So I just want to speak to someone who's not you, that's going to tell me everything's going to be okay. Right. And so I don't really want to speak to a reference. It's just a bit of a cry for, help and security. So if a salesperson can pick up on that, right, which takes a lot of pattern recognition and empathy, then they can lead their customer through the process and be a lot more prescriptive, which actually, not only from a conversion standpoint is good practice, but like when you think about how many solutions, especially in the technology world, which I know we probably work a lot, in all of us, there's so many solutions in the market. And to an average customer, it's so dizzying, and they don't care about your stupid platform and the bits and bytes, and it's made with recycled aluminum. So to the extent that we can be prescriptive and actually realize that our customers are really busy and our job is to help save them some time, that dose of empathy can accelerate the sales cycle and ultimately make those customers feel like we are helpful, trustworthy people that understand their needs and they're more willing to kind of come back to us. If I can, I'll just finish off with the Best Buy example because not sponsored by Best Buy, but maybe we can
or
chase
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
We're chasing some of those dollars. So imagine you go into Best Buy and you want to buy a TV, and there's a Samsung and an LG and a Sony, and you say to the sales rep there, "Tell me about these TVs. Like, what's the difference?" And then they go to like the little cards underneath the TV.
Right.
I know where you're going.
I personally had this happen in the last
like,
60 days.
You know what I'm talking about. They start reading the cards, and you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm not an idiot. I could have done that. Okay?
Right.
I want you to tell me the stuff that's not on the cards. I want you to tell me like which breaks down more and what's the average cost to repair and how long the lamp life, like all these things I don't know. So, that's what I mean by being prescriptive. If you want to build trust with your customers, recognizing the journey that they're on and helping meet them, at that journey can help a ton. I mean, it's empathetic and it can help build trust, and being more prescriptive in that respect can help them see you as someone who's valuable and worth coming back to. Because I would come back to that Best Buy sales rep who told me the thing that I don't know or can't learn about on the card of the TV. Someone who's just reading the card. Like that's in my book. I call that the known spoken. That's like, if you don't know that, we shouldn't allow you to speak to customers, right? That's not what they're doing.
Well, I knew this was going to be a fun conversation, David. And, not only has it been a fun conversation, but our new friends at Starbucks and Best Buy have
they love
definitely
call.
got some loves there. Free coffee and electronics. Actually, two of my favorite things. So, hey, cerebral selling, how can we learn more?
Yeah, I mean, so, I actually been accused of giving away too much stuff for free, but go ahead. It's at cerebralselling.com is my website. I have a YouTube channel and Instagram page by the same names where I give out tons of free content. And the book is called Sell the Way You Buy, and it's available on Amazon. It's on audiobook. Wherever you buy books, you can find it.
Awesome. You'll find the link in the show notes as well. David, what a blast. Always fun hanging out with fellow Canadian. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight with us today. It's been fantastic.
Oh, no, I'm a fan of both of you. It's been great to connect. And thank you for inviting me to connect with your audience.
Awesome.
Anytime. See you later,
awesome.
David. Oh,
wow.
I could. What a great
Where do you go with this? So many great things.
But you know what is, if I reflect back on the last 30 minutes with David, I'm going to go back. This stuff's not rocket science. It's really not rocket science. It's almost treat people the same way you'd want to be treated. That's why I just love in the very beginning, and the premise around some of the stuff in his book is, as sellers, we're not selling the same way we're buying.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so important for us to remember that. And I think the concepts have been shared today. I love the fact that it's backed with research and backed with, this is stuff we know. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that empathy is something that isn't just an, inherent trait. It can be developed, nurtured. And I think this is something that is so important for us to remember. And in the Selling from the Heart audience, this is an incredible community of sales professionals around the world that are dedicated to being genuine and authentic and all of these things. And there's a lot of natural empathy in our community. However, there's work to be done, right? And I love that quote earlier that said, just empathy does not mean you're lazy. Like, whoa, some people mistake empathy with laziness. Or I feel you, I don't have to be persistent. I don't have to be detailed. I don't have to follow through and follow up all of these things that are, the disciplined habits component of the trust formula. And so this is such rich stuff.
It's so there's so many nuggets. I even, I even love that I dropped the sincerity suit. I don't know why. It's just like, boom.
There you go. You heard it here first. Hey, by the way, if you missed the trust building challenge, you don't want to miss it. We recorded the whole thing. You can share it with your coworkers, with your clients, anybody that is in sales, has a sales team, or just is in a profession where they need to nurture and develop trust. Go to 2021trustchallenge.com. You'll get access to all the recordings, and you'll also learn about the trust building intensive, which is kicking off here right around the time this podcast is launching. If you want to know more about that, just reach out to me or Larry. But until next time, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who is sharing the podcast, leaving reviews. It helps us. It helps fuel the movement of authenticity in the sales profession. So thank you for that. And until next time, keep being genuine, keep being authentic, keep adding real value, grow in empathy, and most of all, sell from the heart.